Sarah adjusted the strap of her laptop bag. The familiar weight a small comfort against the humid Chicago air. Another city, another conference, another generic hotel room. Her life, meticulously organized and utterly predictable, was a series of well-executed transitions. The taxi, a vehicle smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation, weaved through the late afternoon traffic, its windows a blurry canvas of brick buildings and hurried pedestrians. She pulled up the hotel confirmation on her phone, the Grandview. A quaint name for what she expected to be a standard, mid-range establishment. Perfect for 2 nights of networking and PowerPoints. The Grandview, however, possessed a peculiar quietness the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't the hushed reverence of a luxury hotel, but something more akin to a forgotten library, echoing with unspoken histories. The lobby, with its faded velvet armchairs and a slightly too dim chandelier, felt less grand and more antique. A young man, barely out of his teens, sat behind the reception desk, his uniform a size too large, giving him an almost childlike appearance. He looked up, startled, as she approached, as if her presence had broken a fragile spell. "Welcome to the Grandview," he mumbled, his voice reedy, his gaze skittering away the moment it met hers. He seemed to shrink a little as she provided her name. "Sarah Harding. I have a reservation." He typed, his fingers clumsy on the keyboard, and then paused. His gaze flickered from the screen to her, a brief, unreadable hesitation. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Ms. Harding. Room 13. He swallowed, a visible bob of his Adam's apple, and his eyes darted towards a key rack on the wall behind him, as if confirming something unpleasant, something he wished wasn't true. Sarah raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional skepticism. "Is there a problem with 13? She'd never been superstitious. A number was just a number. It was a common room for discounts sometimes." No, not at all," he said, perhaps a little too quickly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The smile was a mask, thin and ill-fitting. "It's a very quiet room. Excellent for concentration." He pushed the keycard across the counter, his fingers brushing hers with a fleeting coolness. He avoided her gaze, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond her shoulder. "Elevator to your left, 3rd floor." His obvious discomfort registered, a faint flicker of annoyance in Sarah. Was this some kind of bad joke? Or was the young man simply new and overwhelmed by his duties? She dismissed it. Long day. Get to the room, order room service, prepare for tomorrow's presentation. The elevator hummed a slow, mournful tune as it ascended, each floor a deliberate, creaking climb. The 3rd floor hallway was even quieter than the lobby. The carpet, a dizzying pattern of maroon and gold, seemed to absorb all sound, swallowing her footsteps whole. Every door she passed looked identical, save for the brass numbers affixed to them, gleaming dully in the low light. 11, 12, then a stretch of blank, unsettling wall, and then 13. Room 13. The number stood out, not because it was different, but because it felt isolated. The door itself was a heavy slab of dark wood, indistinguishable from the others, yet a prickle of inexplicable unease traced its way up her spine. She told herself it was the quiet, the slightly stale air, the lingering fatigue from her flight. Nothing more. She swiped the keycard. The green light blinked, and a soft, hollow click echoed in the oppressive silence. She pushed the door open, stepping across the threshold, and the air shifted. It wasn't just a change in temperature, though a sudden, profound chill did sweep over her, raising goosebumps on her arms despite the warmth she'd carried from the elevator. It was a change in density. The air in room 13 felt thick, heavy, as if it had settled and stagnated for years, holding its breath, waiting. The room was standard fare, a queen-sized bed with a floral comforter, a small writing desk tucked into a corner, a television mounted on the wall, and a single armchair by the window. Everything was unnervingly neat, almost pristine. Too neat. Like a display, rather than a place designed for human occupancy. A faint, almost imperceptible scent hung in the air, something metallic, like old pennies left in a forgotten drawer, mixed with the cloying sweetness of decaying roses. Sarah wrinkled her nose, her initial thought being that the cleaning staff had used a particularly aggressive air freshener to mask something. She dropped her laptop bag onto the floor beside the armchair, the thud resonating a little too loudly in the stillness, a stark intrusion. A shadow seemed to deepen in the far corner of the room, by the bathroom door, then recede, almost as if it were breathing. Sarah blinked, rubbing her eyes. The low light from the single bedside lamp, casting lone, wavering shadows, was playing tricks on her already tired mind. She walked towards the window, pulling back the heavy, gold-threaded curtains. The view was unremarkable, a monotonous brick wall of an adjacent building and a sliver of gray, indifferent sky. As she let the curtain fall, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window pane. For a fleeting second, just behind her shoulder, a darker, indistinct shape seemed to hover, an outline of something that wasn't there a moment before. Her breath hitched, a sharp intake of cold air. She spun around, but the room was empty, save for her own solitary, trembling figure. "Must be the glass," she muttered, her voice sounding thin and alien in the profound silence. The logical explanation. The only explanation. She decided to unpack, to ground herself in the mundane. Opening her suitcase on the luggage rack, she began to methodically fold her clothes into the dresser drawers. She reached for her toiletry bag, which she was certain she'd placed on top of her clothes for easy access. It wasn't there. She rummaged through the suitcase, then checked the laptop bag, the armchair, even under the bed, a growing knot of frustration tightening in her stomach. Nothing. A surge of irrational anger bubbled up. Had she left it in the taxi? No, she distinctly remembered putting it in the suitcase before leaving her apartment. Her memory was usually faultless. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Sarah told herself to calm down. Stress, lack of sleep, that peculiar hotel clerk, it was all getting to her. She went into the bathroom, a small, tiled space that felt even colder than the main room, an Arctic chill clinging to the porcelain fixtures. The faucet dripped, a slow, methodical drip, 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 that seemed to amplify the silence, each drop a percussive beat against the porcelain. She turned the handle, tightening it with all her strength, but the sound persisted, a phantom echo of water on water. She stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. Her face looked pale, almost translucent, her eyes wide, dark pools of apprehension. She looked tired, and undeniably a little scared. As she splashed cold water on her face, trying to clear her head, she heard it. A faint scraping sound from the main room. Like something being dragged across the carpet, a heavy, deliberate movement. Her heart leaped into her throat, a frantic bird trapped in her ribs. She froze, listening intently, every nerve ending screaming. The sound stopped. Slowly, cautiously, she crept back into the bedroom, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. Her suitcase was still on the rack, unmolested, but now, sitting neatly on the bedside table, was her toiletry bag. It hadn't been there a minute ago. It was impossible. She hadn't left the room, hadn't turned her back for more than a minute. She walked over, slowly, as if approaching a wild, unpredictable animal. Her fingers, trembling slightly, brushed against the soft fabric. It was real, tangible, cold. A chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature enveloped her, sinking deep into her bones. Her mind, usually a fortress of logic and reason, began to fray at the edges, the carefully constructed walls of her reality cracking. This wasn't just a trick of the light or an overactive imagination. Something was demonstrably, terrifyingly wrong. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over the dial button for reception. What would she say? "Excuse me, my toiletry bag just teleported onto the nightstand." She imagined the clerk's reedy voice, his feigned politeness, his subtle smirk. No, she couldn't. Not yet. She needed to be sure. Or perhaps she was simply too afraid of the answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress surprisingly firm, and stared at the door. The silence in the room now felt less like an absence of sound and more like a presence. A watchful, waiting presence. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on her, stealing the oxygen from her lungs. Every shadow in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, to coil, to writhe. She could almost feel eyes on her, though there was nothing to see. The faint, metallic scent of old pennies and decaying roses grew stronger, becoming almost cloying, suffocating. As the last vestiges of daylight faded outside the window, replaced by the inky blackness of the Chicago night, the room transformed. The mundane objects, the armchair, the desk, even the patterns on the wallpaper, seemed to take on a sinister quality, their outlines blurring, their textures shifting in the dim, inadequate light. She heard a faint whisper, like a sigh exhaled close to her ear, a sound that made the hairs on her neck stand on end, a cold shiver tracing its way down her spine. It was too soft to discern words, yet it carried an undeniable undertone of sorrow, or perhaps something far more sinister. Sarah pulled the comforter up to her chin, her eyes wide and fixed on the bathroom door. The dripping faucet had stopped. But now, from within the bathroom, she heard a new sound. A soft, rhythmic scratching, like fingernails dragging across tile, growing louder, more insistent, pulling her deeper into the chilling realization that room 13 was far from just a quiet place for concentration. It was a place where something was awake, and it was not alone. The rhythmic scratching from the bathroom continued, a chilling counterpoint to the frantic beating of Sarah's heart. It wasn't a rodent, not with that deliberate, almost scraping quality. It was something more. Her breath hitched, ragged and shallow, as she forced herself to her feet. Every muscle screamed at her to flee, to barricade the door, but a terrifying, morbid curiosity, intertwined with a desperate need for logical explanation, pulled her towards the source of the sound. Her bare feet, cold on the carpet, made no sound as she crept towards the bathroom door, her eyes wide, fixed on the dark rectangle of the opening. The scratching stopped abruptly as she reached the threshold, replaced by an even more profound, suffocating silence. The bathroom seemed to exhale, a wave of glacial cold washing over her, raising fresh goosebumps on her arms. Hesitantly, she peered inside. The small, tiled space was empty. The dripping faucet, which had ceased earlier, was now completely silent, the porcelain basin gleaming dully in the dim light filtering in from the main room. Nothing out of place. Nothing to explain the sound. Yet, the air was thick, heavy with the metallic tang of old pennies and that cloying sweetness of decaying roses, stronger than ever, almost suffocating. It clung to her, seeped into her very pores. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice barely a tremor, a pathetic attempt to break the oppressive silence, to prove to herself that she wasn't alone, that there was a rational answer. No reply. Only the vast, hungry quiet. She stepped fully into the bathroom, turning slowly, scanning every inch of the tiny space. The mirror above the sink, reflecting her pale, terrified face, seemed to ripple for a second, a fleeting distortion, as if something invisible had just passed through its surface. She blinked, and it was gone, her reflection returning to normal, albeit looking even more haunted. She backed out, feeling an invisible presence pressing in on her, urging her out of the room. Back in the bedroom, the air felt marginally lighter, but the room itself seemed to have shifted. The shadows in the corners writhed, no longer static, but subtly moving, deepening, retreating. The television, mounted on the wall, flickered erratically, casting brief, blinding flashes of light that illuminated the room in stark, fleeting bursts, revealing nothing and everything all at once. Each flash seemed to outline a shape that wasn't there in the darkness, a figure just beyond the edge of her vision. The painting above the bed, a generic landscape, was now noticeably askew, its corner dipping precariously, as if someone had just brushed past it. Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps. This was beyond odd, beyond coincidence. Her logical mind, usually her fortress, was crumbling. She needed to leave. Now. Her phone was in her hand, her thumb poised over the emergency services number, then reception. She hesitated. What would she say? My room is haunted, and my toiletry bag is playing hide and seek? They'd think she was mad. But the alternative was to stay in the suffocating, breathing room. She tried reception first. No dial tone. Dead. She tried her cell phone. No signal. Not even a single bar. She walked to the window, pulling back the curtain, hoping for a connection, but the screen remained stubbornly blank, displaying no service. Panic, cold and sharp, began to truly set in. She was cut off. She turned to the door, her only remaining exit. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, she lunged towards it, fumbling for the handle. It was cold, slick with an invisible film. She twisted, pushed, pulled with all her might, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Not just stuck, but completely unyielding, as if bolted from the other side. She rattled it, pounded on the heavy wood, calling out, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Hello? Is anyone there? Let me out." Her cries were swallowed by the oppressive silence of the hallway, a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like an active, malicious absorption of sound. As she pulled back, defeated, her reflection in the full-length mirror by the door caught her eye. And this time, it wasn't a fleeting distortion. Standing directly behind her, a few inches from her shoulder, was a woman. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, fixed on Sarah with an expression of profound sorrow and desperate rage. Her hair, long and dark, seemed to float around her head, shimmering faintly in the dim light. She wore a simple, old-fashioned nightgown, stained with a dark, almost black patch over her chest. Sarah screamed, a raw, animal sound that tore from her throat, echoing eerily in the confined space. She spun around, her heart trying to claw its way out of her chest, but there was nothing there. Only the empty, suffocating air. She backed away, stumbling over her own feet, until she hit the wall, sliding down it until she was huddled on the floor, trembling uncontrollably. Her mind raced, desperate for an explanation. A hallucination? Fatigue? But the image had been so vivid, so real. The stain on the nightgown, It looked like dried blood. Driven by a chilling instinct, a need to understand the source of this terror, Sarah forced herself to stand. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any clue, any hidden detail she might have missed. Her gaze fell on the small writing desk in the corner. It looked innocent enough, but the feeling that something was hidden, something was being kept from her, was overwhelming. She approached it cautiously, running her fingers along the smooth, cool wood. The single drawer was stiff, but she managed to pull it open. Inside, nestled beneath a stack of blank hotel stationery, was an old, folded newspaper clipping. Yellowed and brittle with age, it felt impossibly cold in her fingers. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. The headline, in bold, stark type, screamed at her, "Tragedy at the Grandview. Woman found murdered in room 13." The date on the newspaper was 20 years ago. The article detailed the brutal murder of a young woman named Eleanor Vance, found dead in room 13, stabbed multiple times. The police had no suspects, no motive. The case had gone cold. A photograph, grainy and faded, showed a woman with long, dark hair, eerily similar to the apparition she had just seen. Eleanor Vance. The name echoed in the terrifying silence of the room. The article described the scene. The room was reportedly undisturbed, save for the victim. No signs of forced entry. A baffling crime. Sarah's eyes scanned the words, her mind reeling. This wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. Eleanor Vance. Murdered in this very room. And now she was here. As Sarah stared at the clipping, the faint scent of decaying roses intensified, becoming overpoweringly sweet and sickly. The temperature in the room plummeted, the air growing dense and heavy. The shadows coiled tighter, merging into a single, shifting mass in the corner by the bathroom door. A low, guttural moan, filled with an unimaginable sorrow and a burning hatred, emanated from the darkness, a sound that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. "You know now," a voice whispered, cold and dry, right beside her ear, a voice that was not of this world, yet chillingly clear. "You know what happened?" Sarah spun, dropping the newspaper clipping, which fluttered to the floor like a dying bird. Eleanor Vance stood before her, no longer a fleeting apparition, but a fully formed, translucent figure, her eyes burning with an incandescent fury that seemed to consume the very air around her. Her nightgown, once merely stained, now appeared drenched in spectral blood that seemed to writhe and flow across the fabric. A spectral knife, shimmering with a faint, malevolent light, appeared in her hand, its tip dripping with an unseen ichor. "He left me here," Eleanor's voice rasped, a chorus of agony and vengeance, echoing from every corner of the room, from within Sarah's own head. "Left me to rot." Her gaze, filled with an ancient, unbearable pain, pierced Sarah, held her captive. The temperature continued to drop, so cold it burned, seeping into her skin, her muscles, her very core. She tried to move, to scream, but she was paralyzed by an unseen force, her legs locked, her voice caught in her throat. The spectral figure of Eleanor Vance took a step closer, the cold radiating from her like a physical force. The air crackled with malevolent energy. Sarah could feel the ghost's breath on her face, cold and smelling of graves. Eleanor raised the shimmering knife, its blade reflecting the dim, flickering light of the bedside lamp, and pointed it slowly, deliberately at Sarah's chest, right where her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "And now," Eleanor whispered, her voice a chilling promise of eternal torment, "you will understand." The spectral knife hovered inches from Sarah's chest, its ethereal point shimmering with a malevolent, phosphorescent glow. Sarah's breath was trapped in her lungs, a useless, burning ache. Her body was a statue of terror, every nerve screaming in a silent, desperate plea for release. Eleanor Vance's eyes, once pools of sorrow, now blazed with an inferno of ancient pain and a vengeful fire that threatened to consume Sarah whole. The cold that radiated from the apparition was absolute, a chilling void that seeped into her bones, freezing her blood, stealing the warmth from her very soul. The air, already thick with the cloying sweetness of decaying roses and the metallic tang of old pennies, became a suffocating shroud, pressing down on her, stealing the precious oxygen from her gasping throat. She could feel the ghostly breath on her face, a frigid, phantom caress that promised only suffering. "He left me here," Eleanor repeated, her voice a desolate whisper that echoed not just from her translucent lips, but from the very walls, the ceiling, the floor, resonating deep within Sarah's own skull. It was a chorus of agony, a symphony of torment that made Sarah's teeth ache and her vision swim. "Left me to rot. Unseen. Unheard. Unavenged." The spectral knife, instead of plunging into Sarah, began to glow brighter, pulsing with an inner light. Suddenly, the room dissolved. Sarah wasn't in room 13 anymore, but somewhere else, yet still rooted to the spot, still trapped in Eleanor's inescapable gaze. The walls around her blurred, the furniture melted away, replaced by a swirling vortex of shadows and distorted light. Images flashed before her eyes, disjointed and terrifying, yet undeniably real. She saw a woman, young and vibrant, her laughter echoing in a different, brighter version of room 13. Eleanor. She saw the same room, but through the eyes of a different occupant, a man with a cruel smile and eyes that held no warmth. She saw hands, large and brutal, grappling, struggling. She saw the glint of steel, then a splash of crimson, impossibly vivid, spreading across a white nightgown. The same nightgown Eleanor wore. The scent of roses, once cloying, became overwhelmingly fresh, then rapidly decayed, a sickening transformation that paralleled the life draining from the woman on the floor. The vision snapped back to the present, Sarah once again in the claustrophobic confines of room 13, Eleanor still before her, the knife still pointed. But now Sarah understood. She felt the echoes of Eleanor's terror, the betrayal, the agonizing pain of a life brutally extinguished. He thought he could escape, Eleanor's voice scraped, raw with ancient grief. He thought he could walk away. But this place, this hotel, it remembers. It hungers. It keeps what it takes. Her spectral hand, translucent and shimmering, gestured vaguely around the room, then beyond, as if encompassing the entire hotel. I am not the first, nor will you be the last. This room, it is a crucible, a stage for the same, endless play. They come, they stay, they die. Over and over. A cycle of screams. A feast for the walls. As Eleanor spoke, the room began to shift, subtly at first, then more overly. The outlines of the furniture seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting. The wallpaper patterns rippled like water. The dim light from the bedside lamp flickered wildly, casting grotesque, dancing shadows that seemed to twist into skeletal figures, reaching out with clawed hands. The metallic scent intensified, now unmistakably the smell of fresh blood, overlaying the decaying roses, a nauseating combination that made Sarah's stomach churn. The paralysis that had gripped Sarah began to loosen, not because the fear had lessened, but because it had transformed into a primal, desperate need for survival. She had to escape. This was not just a haunting, this was a trap. A cursed hotel, a cycle of death, and she, Sarah Harding, was the next doomed participant. With a surge of adrenaline so potent it burned, Sarah broke free from the invisible bonds. She lunged, not at Eleanor, but towards the door, her only hope. Her legs, stiff and unresponsive moments before, now pumped with a frantic, uncoordinated energy. She didn't look back, not daring to, the chilling whisper of Eleanor's voice still echoing in her ears. You will understand. She reached the heavy wooden door, her trembling fingers fumbling for the handle. It was still cold, still slick, but this time it turned. A gasp of desperate hope tore from her throat. It wasn't locked. It had been, she was certain, but now. The green light on the keycard reader pulsed, then went dark. The hollow click echoed in the silence as she pulled. The door swung open, revealing the hallway. But it wasn't the same hallway she had entered. The maroon and gold carpet was still there, but it seemed to stretch into an impossible distance. The perspective warped, the far end disappearing into an inky blackness that devoured all light. The brass numbers on the doors were gone, replaced by a uniform, unsettling blankness. The air here was even colder than in room 13, a glacial draft that cut through her thin nightclothes, raising goosebumps that felt like 1,000 tiny needles. A faint, mournful moan seemed to drift from the endless corridor, a sound of profound despair, joined by other, fainter whispers that seemed to coil around her, urging her back, pulling her deeper into the hotel's cursed embrace. Sarah stepped out, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. She took a tentative step, then another, her bare feet silent on the thick, sound-absorbing carpet. The silence of the hallway was more terrifying than any scream, a vast, hungry void that seemed to swallow her very essence. She tried to run, to sprint down the endless corridor, but her legs felt heavy, as if moving through thick, unseen water. Each step was an immense effort, a desperate struggle against an invisible current that pulled her backward, back into the open maw of room 13. She looked over his shoulder. The door to room 13, which she had just exited, was now slowly, inexorably, swinging shut. A sliver of light from within the room, then darkness. The heavy thud as it closed echoed with the finality of a coffin lid. She spun back around, her breath catching in her throat. The hallway was still endless, still dark, still cold. But now, at the very end of the impossibly long corridor, a flicker of light appeared. It wasn't the warm, inviting light of an exit. It was a cold, blue luminescence, pulsating with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a dying heart. And as it pulsed, she saw them. Figures. Shifting, translucent forms, barely discernible against the deepening gloom. They were indistinct, yet she could feel their presence, their overwhelming sorrow, their collective despair. They seemed to float, their movements slow and deliberate, moving towards her. More than one. Many. Victims. The cycle. Panic, absolute and overwhelming, consumed her. This hotel wasn't just old, it was alive. And it was hungry. It had lured her, tracked her, and now it was coming for her. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. She tried to run, but her legs buckled beneath her. She fell to her knees, the icy cold of the carpet seeping into her skin, mirroring the chill that had already permeated her soul. The ghostly figures at the end of the hallway moved closer, their forms becoming slightly more defined, their faces, though indistinct, radiating an ancient, familiar pain. From behind her, the heavy wood of room 13's door creaked open, just a fraction. A thin, icy draft escaped, carrying with it the sickeningly sweet scent of decaying roses and the metallic tang of blood. A low, guttural moan, laced with an unbearable hatred, emanated from the darkness within. Eleanor Vance. She was still there. And she was waiting. Sarah was trapped, caught between the spectral victims of the hotel's endless cycle and the vengeful spirit of room 13. Her frantic gaze darted from the approaching figures in the hallway to the crack in room 13's door. There was no escape. The hotel had claimed her. And as the crack in the door widened, revealing a single, burning eye in the darkness within, Sarah knew her time was up. The air thickened, pressing down on Sarah as if the very hotel was exhaling, a long, mournful sigh that swallowed the last vestiges of hope. The ghostly figures at the end of the impossible hallway, indistinct yet undeniably present, drifted closer, their collective despair a palpable wave of sorrow that washed over her. Their forms shimmered, translucent, like smoke attempting to coalesce, their faces a blur of ancient agony. They were the hotel's forgotten, its endless victims, drawn to witness the new sacrifice. From behind her, the heavy wooden door of room 13 creaked wider, no longer just a sliver, but slowly, deliberately, revealing the inky blackness within. The sickeningly sweet scent of decaying roses and the metallic tang of blood poured out, a nauseating wave that made Sarah gag. A low, guttural moan, laced with an unbearable hatred, emanated from the darkness, a sound that seemed to scrape against the inside of her skull. Eleanor Vance. She was not just waiting, she was emerging. Sarah, paralyzed for a beat, found a desperate, animalistic surge of adrenaline. She was trapped, but her mind, even on the precipice of madness, refused to simply surrender. She had to try. She scrambled to her feet, her legs burning, her bare feet slipping on the slick, cold carpet. She lunged, not towards the approaching spectral horde, but sideways, towards the nearest door, any door, just to break the line of sight, to find a temporary reprieve from the suffocating presence of Eleanor. Her fingers scrabbled at the brass number, but it was gone, replaced by smooth, cold wood. The door wouldn't budge. As she pulled back, a chill that transcended physical cold enveloped her. Eleanor Vance stood fully in the doorway of room 13, no longer a translucent specter, but solid, terrifyingly real, her eyes burning like embers in the profound darkness of the room behind her. Her nightgown, once stained, was now a canvas of glistening, fresh blood, impossibly bright against the faded fabric. The spectral knife, still clutched in her hand, pulsed with a malevolent blue light, its point aimed directly at Sarah's heart. "Now you understand the cycle, don't you, Sarah Harding?" Eleanor's voice was no longer a whisper, but a resonant, chilling command that filled the hallway, silencing the distant moans of the other spirits. "You feel the hunger of this place, the thirst for souls." She took a slow, deliberate step, the spectral knife raising slightly. "But you only know half the truth, the half I want you to know." Eleanor's eyes, burning with an almost physical heat, fixed on Sarah. A blinding flash of light erupted from the spectral knife, not an external light, but one that seemed to ignite within Sarah's own mind. The hallway, the other spirits, even Eleanor herself, blurred and dissolved, replaced by a torrent of raw, disjointed images. Sarah was falling, plunging headlong into a maelstrom of memories that were not her own, yet felt terrifyingly familiar. She saw the room again, room 13, but vibrant, alive with the light of a sunny afternoon. Eleanor was there, laughing, her hair a cascade of dark silk, her eyes bright with a naive trust. And then, another figure entered the room. A man. His back was to Sarah, but there was something familiar about his build, the way his shoulders hunched, the almost predatory grace of his movements. He spoke, his voice a low murmur, cajoling, manipulative. Sarah felt a profound sense of recognition, a sickening lurch in her stomach, as if a memory long buried, violently suppressed, was clawing its way to the surface. The scene shifted, becoming darker, more frenzied. The man's face, still obscured, turned towards Eleanor, his expression twisting from charm to something cold, venomous. Eleanor's laughter died, replaced by a gasp of shock, then a whimper of fear. A flash of silver. A scream that ripped through the air, a sound that tore at Sarah's very soul because it felt like her scream, a primal agony she knew intimately. The sound of flesh tearing, a body falling, blood, and possibly red, blooming on Eleanor's white nightgown, just as it was now, only this time, it was fresh, warm, life-giving, pouring out onto the carpet. Sarah was forced to witness it all, not as an observer, but from within the man's own chillingly detached perspective. She felt the weight of the knife in his hand, the visceral shock of impact, the desperate struggle of Eleanor's dying moments. She felt the coldness, the absolute lack of remorse, the quick, calculating decision to flee, to leave the body, to erase all trace. And as the man turned, his face finally revealing itself in the flickering, dying light of the room, Sarah screamed, a sound that was pure, unadulterated horror. It was her face. Not exactly, not entirely. But the eyes. The eyes were hers. The same shape, the same piercing blue, but filled with a cruel, empty malice she had never known. The mouth, a thin, tight line, was unmistakably her own. The man was her, or a part of her. A terrifying, ancient echo of a soul, condemned to repeat its darkest sin. The vision snapped back, the hallway rushing back into focus, the other spirits closing in. Eleanor Vance stood before her, her ghostly face alight with triumph and a chilling, profound despair. "You remember now, don't you, Sarah Harding?" Eleanor's voice was a venomous whisper, dripping with satisfaction. "Or perhaps, you simply are remembering. The cycle demands it. The hotel remembers the dead. You, in your many forms, have always returned. The killer always returns to the scene of the crime. And I have always waited." Sarah stumbled backward, her mind reeling, shattered into a million pieces. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She wasn't just a random victim. She was the one. The murderer, or the vessel for the murderer's soul. The hotel hadn't just chosen her, it had summoned her. To complete the cycle. To face her past. To be consumed. Eleanor Vance raised the spectral knife higher, its unholy glow reflecting in Sarah's wide, terrified eyes. The other spirits in the hallway, once indistinct, now seemed to solidify, their faces twisting into expressions of anticipation, their spectral hands reaching out. They were not here to save her. They were here to witness, to participate, to claim their share of the vengeance. "It is time, Sarah," Eleanor whispered, her voice a death knell. "Time to pay. Time to feel what I felt. The hotel hungers for your soul, just as it hungered for mine. And this time, there will be no escape. Not for you. Not for us." As Eleanor lunged, the spectral knife plunging towards Sarah's chest, the last thought that screamed through Sarah's mind was not of escape, but of the chilling, undeniable truth. Room 13 was not just a place of death. It was a mirror, reflecting her own, unforgivable sin, trapping her in an eternal loop of agonizing retribution. The cold, the smell of blood and roses, the terrifying faces of the past victims. They were all waiting, eager to welcome her into their endless, cursed embrace.